Babe, I can't wait for the company party tonight. We can finally show up together in public. This time, I don't have to invent an excuse to leave Jade at home. Jade Adams read those words on her husband's cell phone, and her world came crashing down in seconds. 8 years of marriage. 8 years believing that Clay protected her from company parties out of love. 8 years of being the perfect, smart, and dedicated wife who abandoned her promising career to support his dreams. But in that moment, looking at the message he had sent to Layla, his 24-year-old secretary, a single truth crystallized in Jade's brilliant mind. She wasn't the protected wife. She was the hidden wife. Clay wasn't ashamed of taking her to parties. He was ashamed of her. As she watched from the window of their London penthouse, seeing life go on as usual down below, Jade made a decision that would change everything. If Clay wanted to hide her, she would become impossible to ignore. If he thought he could replace her with a naive young woman, he would discover that he had completely underestimated the woman he married. Revenge, after all, is a dish best served cold. And Jade had all the patience in the world to prepare the perfect feast. At the next company party, the one where Clay would finally introduce Layla as his new partner, he would receive the surprise of his life. Because Jade Adams, the simple woman he was so ashamed to show off, was about to transform into the most powerful person he had ever faced. The game had begun. And this time, Jade would set the rules. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. The discovery. The London sun was relentless on the windows of their penthouse apartment in Shoreditch, but Jade barely noticed the warmth. Her dark eyes, normally bright and expressive, were fixed on the screen of the cell phone, trembling in her delicate hands. The messages she had just discovered on Clay's phone were like stabs to her heart. Babe, I can't wait for the company party tonight. We can finally show up together in public, Layla, her husband's secretary, had sent. Me too, my love. This time I don't have to invent an excuse to leave Jade at home, replied Clay, the man she had shared the last 8 years of her life with. Jade closed her eyes, feeling the world crumble around her. How many times had Clay said that company parties were just business, that it would be tedious for her, that he preferred to protect her from the hostile corporate environment? How many times had she believed him, even feeling special for having such a thoughtful husband? Now it all made sense. The constant work trips, the whispered phone calls, the different perfume on his clothes, the nights he came home too late for any business meeting. Clay wasn't protecting her. He was hiding her. The 29-year-old woman rose slowly from the Italian leather sofa they had chosen together on their honeymoon in Milan. Her bare feet touched the cold marble floor as she walked to the balcony that offered a panoramic view of the city. Down below, life went on as normal. Cars honked, people hurried, street vendors shouted their offers, as if the world hadn't just ended for her. Jade was everything any man could desire. A law graduate from the London School of Economics, with a specialization in corporate law from the University of Barcelona, she had given up a promising career to support Clay's dreams when he decided to expand his import business. Her beauty was natural and striking. Black hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her fair skin contrasted perfectly with her almond-shaped eyes, and a smile that lit up any room. But more than her appearance, it was her intelligence that had always caught people's attention. Jade possessed an analytical and strategic mind that had helped Clay build his business empire, even if he never publicly acknowledged her contribution. She went through contracts, identified legal loopholes, suggested market expansions, all behind the scenes, always behind the scenes. Now, looking at the London skyline, Jade felt a transformation happening inside her. The pain of betrayal was crystallizing into something different, something more powerful. It wasn't just rage, it was determination, a thirst for justice that made her blood boil and her mind work at maximum speed. She went back inside the apartment and looked at every detail around her. The Frida Kahlo painting she had chosen, the furniture she had lovingly selected, the books in her personal library perfectly organized. This was her home, her life, and Clay had trampled all over it. Her phone vibrated. A message from her best friend, Carmen. "Jade, honey, I saw a picture on Instagram of Clay's company party. You didn't go?" He was with a woman. Jade didn't need to see the picture to know who the woman was. Layla, the blonde 24-year-old Clay had hired 6 months ago as his executive assistant. The same one who always smiled a little too much when Jade visited the office, who made a point of showing intimacy with Clay's personal affairs. But this time would be different. Jade would no longer be the naive wife who stayed home while her husband had fun with his mistress. She had discovered something they didn't imagine she knew. The annual party of the British Importers Association would be next week at the Savoy Hotel. The most important event on Clay's business calendar, where he hoped to close million-pound deals with international investors. A slow, calculated smile spread across Jade's lips. She knew every detail of Clay's business, every client, every supplier, every financial move. After all, who did they think organized all the documents, prepared the presentations, and reviewed the contracts? She was the one truly behind the success of Clay Imports. That night, while Clay worked late, code for being with Layla, Jade locked herself in her personal office. The walls were decorated with her diplomas and certifications, achievements she had set aside to support her husband. Now, they would be her weapons. She opened her laptop and got to work. First, she needed to understand exactly what Clay's strategy would be at the party. She discreetly accessed his corporate email, a password she had known for years, and began to map out every meeting, every presentation, every important person who would be present. Then, she started her own investigation. She called old contacts from college, colleagues from her internship days at law firms, suppliers she knew from the early years of her marriage. Jade was building her own network, preparing the ground for what was to come. The hours went by unnoticed as she worked. When Clay finally got home at 3 a.m, he found his wife sleeping peacefully in bed. He had no idea she had spent the entire night plotting. In the following days, Jade maintained her normal routine. She prepared Clay's breakfast, asked about his day, and feigned interest in his stories about important meetings. But inside, she was preparing like a chess player, planning dozens of moves ahead. She knew that revenge was a dish best served cold, and she had all the patience in the world. Clay and Layla had underestimated the wrong woman. Soon, they would discover that Jade wasn't just a trophy wife. She was a force of nature. When the night of the party arrived, Clay's world would fall apart, and Jade would be there to see every second of his humiliation. The first move of the game had begun, and she already had several moves of an advantage. What would you do if you discovered a betrayal like this? Confront him immediately or plot your revenge? Leave your opinion in the comments below. The plan. A week had passed since the devastating discovery, and Jade had completely transformed. On the outside, she maintained the same routine as always. She woke up early, prepared coffee, and saw Clay off with a kiss on the cheek. But inside, a war machine was operating at full capacity. On that Tuesday morning, while Clay was in the shower humming a song, probably thinking about Layla, Jade was in her private office, finalizing the last details of her plan. She had spent entire nights studying her husband's every move, every behavioral pattern, and every weakness she could exploit. Her first move had been brilliant in its simplicity. Jade had sought out Helen Vasquez, London's most renowned corporate event organizer. Helen was known for her impeccable contacts and absolute discretion. Exactly what Jade needed. "Mrs. Adams," Helen had said during their meeting at a discreet cafe in Notting Hill, "I understand your situation perfectly. Many women go through what you're going through, and yes, I can help you." The plan was elegant. Helen would get Jade a VIP invitation to the British Importers Association party, not as Clay's wife, but as a representative of a fictitious group of European investors interested in the Latin American market. The identity would be built with flawless documents, something Helen had already done for other clients in similar situations. But Jade wouldn't stop there. She had discovered something that made everything even more delicious. Ricardo Mendoza, Clay's biggest rival in the import sector, would be at the party. Ricardo was a 55-year-old man, elegant and extremely successful, who had always shown a discreet interest in Jade at the few social events they had attended together in the past. Over the last few days, Jade had casually run into Ricardo at a few strategic locations in the city. First at Starbucks, where she forgot to bring money, and he graciously paid for her coffee. Then at the Tate Modern, where they had a fascinating conversation about the exhibition of contemporary artists. Ricardo was intelligent, cultured, and clearly attracted to her. "You have a unique perspective on art, Jade," he had commented, while they observed a work by Gabriel Orozco. "It's a shame Clay doesn't share your cultural interests." Ricardo's words had planted a seed. He knew Clay well enough to know that Jade's husband didn't value her intelligence and sophistication. And now, that information would be crucial for the next steps of the plan. That afternoon, Jade received the call she was waiting for. It was Carmen, her best friend, who worked as a society journalist for one of London's most important magazines. "Jade, I got the information you asked for," Carmen said in a low voice. "Leila Herrera, 24 years old, a business graduate from the University of London. She's been working at Clay's company for 6 months. And yes, she will be at the party as his official guest." "Official," Jade repeated, feeling a pang of pain that quickly turned into fuel for her determination. "Yes, honey. From what I found out, Clay registered her as his business partner for the event. Apparently, he's planning to introduce her to the international investors." Jade's blood boiled. Clay wasn't just cheating on her gear. He was replacing her publicly, introducing Leila as if she were a fundamental part of his business, when the one who had truly built everything with him had been Jade. But this information only solidified her resolve. If Clay wanted to play this way, she would play better. That night, after Clay left for one of his late meetings, Jade put the second phase of her plan into action. She called Miguel Santos, one of London's most respected corporate lawyers. Miguel had been her professor at the university and had kept in touch over the years. "Jade, what a surprise to hear your voice," Miguel had said, genuinely happy. "How are things? I still regret you left law. You were one of the brightest minds in your class." "Miguel, I need your help with something delicate," Jade had replied. "Could you meet me tomorrow? It's about a rather complex business matter." The meeting was scheduled for the next day at Miguel's elegant office in the West End. When Jade arrived, wearing an impeccable black suit that accentuated her elegant figure and natural authority, Miguel couldn't hide his admiration. "You're radiant, Jade. What can I do for you?" Jade explained her situation with the coldness of an experienced negotiator. She didn't mention the betrayal. That would be irrelevant to the legal aspects. Instead, she focused on the facts. She wanted to understand her rights as a spouse regarding the family business, especially considering her unrecognized contribution to the company's growth. "Interesting," Miguel murmured as he took notes. "Do you have documentation of those contributions?" Jade smiled. For 8 years, she had meticulously kept copies of all the contracts she had reviewed, all the market analyses she had prepared, and all the strategies she had developed. Clay had never known about this organization. He assumed she just helped a little and then forgot everything. "I have everything documented, Miguel. Every email, every file, every contribution. Clay never imagined I kept such detailed records." Miguel's eyes lit up with professional interest. "Jade, this is pure gold. With this documentation, we can prove a substantial intellectual contribution to the business. If something were to happen to your marriage, something may be about to happen," Jade interrupted softly. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Clay was at an intimate restaurant with Layla, planning how to introduce her at the party next week. They had no idea that their every move was being carefully watched and cataloged by Jade. "Babe, you'll see how wonderful it will be," Layla whispered, playing with her blonde hair. "We can finally be a real couple in public." "Yes, my love," Clay replied, holding her hand across the table. "After the party, I'm going to talk to Jade about a divorce. I can't live this lie anymore." If they had known that Jade had already discovered everything and was orchestrating their public destruction, they might not have been smiling with such confidence. The next morning, Jade woke up with a sense of power she hadn't felt in a long time. Today would be the day to begin the final phase of her plan. She put on a navy blue dress that brought out her eyes, applied flawless makeup, and tied her hair back in an elegant bun. When Clay came down for coffee, he found his wife more beautiful than ever. "You look beautiful today, Jade," he commented, but there was something distracted in his voice. His mind was clearly somewhere else, or rather, with someone else. "Thank you, darling," she replied with a serene smile. "I have an important meeting today." "A meeting?" Clay seemed surprised. It had been months since Jade had mentioned any professional commitments. "Yes, I'm thinking of going back to work. Maybe it's time to resume my career." Clay almost choked on his coffee. The idea of Jade returning to the job market clearly bothered him. An independent wife would be an obstacle to his plans with Layla. "But darling, there's no need. I take care of everything. You know that." "I know, love," Jade replied, kissing his forehead. "But a woman needs to feel useful, don't you think?" After Clay left for work, Jade allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. In a few days, at the most important party of her husband's career, she would emerge as the hurricane he never saw coming. The revenge was taking shape and would be sweeter than she ever imagined. Do you think Clay and Layla deserve what's about to happen to them? The gala only 3 days remained until the British Importers Association party, and Jade was finalizing the last details of her transformation. She had spent the morning at one of London's most exclusive salons, where a team of professionals worked to enhance her natural beauty to a level that was breathtaking. Her dark hair now fell in perfect waves that framed her face in a cinematic way. The makeup, applied by an artist who worked with celebrities, highlighted her almond eyes in a way that was both elegant and hypnotic. Her nails, painted in a shade of red that symbolized power, completed the transformation. But the real change wasn't physical. It was internal. Jade had regained the confidence she had abandoned during the years of her marriage. Now, when she looked in the mirror, she saw the brilliant and determined woman she had been before meeting Clay again. Her first stop after the salon was at Paloma Herrera's boutique, one of Mexico's most renowned designers. Jade had scheduled a private meeting to choose the dress she would wear to the party, a piece that needed to communicate power, elegance, and a very clear message that she was no longer the submissive wife everyone knew. "Mrs. Adams," Paloma greeted her with a genuine smile. "It's a pleasure to see you again. I heard you were looking for something special." "Very special," Jade confirmed. "I need a dress that makes an unforgettable entrance." Paloma, who had dressed first ladies and international stars, immediately understood the mission. "I have exactly what you need." The dress was a masterpiece, an exclusive model in emerald green Italian silk that contrasted perfectly with Jade's skin. The cut was impeccable, elegant enough for the corporate environment, but with a touch of sensuality that would ensure all eyes turned to her. The piece cost the equivalent of 3 employees' monthly salaries, but Jade didn't hesitate. After all, she had helped build the fortune she would now use for her revenge. "It's perfect," she murmured, observing herself in the mirror. Absolutely perfect. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Clay was in his office trying to concentrate on work, but his mind was completely occupied with thoughts of Layla. He had spent the morning on WhatsApp with her, planning every detail of how they would present themselves at the party. "Babe, I bought a light pink dress for the party," Layla had written. "Do you think it looks good on me?" "You look beautiful in any color, my love," Clay had replied. "I can't wait to introduce you to everyone as my partner." What Clay didn't know was that Jade had access to all these conversations. Over the past few days, she had discreetly installed monitoring software on his phone, a skill she had developed during her digital law studies. Every message, every plan, every move they made was known to her before it even happened. That afternoon, Jade had her last meeting with Helen Vasquez to finalize the details of her fake identity for the party. Helen had created a perfect character. Jade would be introduced as Jade Montenegro, a representative of a consortium of European investors interested in expanding business in Latin America. "All the documents are ready," Helen explained, handing her an elegant folder. "Your business card, credentials of the fictitious company, even a professional website we created. You will be one of the most important people at the party. And the contacts you mentioned? Ah, yes. Ricardo Mendoza has already confirmed his presence, and I discreetly let slip that a very interesting female investor would be there. He showed immediate curiosity. I also spoke with a few economic journalists. They will be there to cover the main businesses, but they are always interested in new and beautiful faces." Jade smiled. Everything was falling perfectly into place. That night, during dinner, Jade watched Clay carefully. He was visibly nervous, constantly checking his phone and seeming distant. Clearly, the proximity of the party and the prospect of finally going public with his relationship with Layla made him anxious. "You seem worried, darling," Jade commented casually, delicately cutting the salmon on her plate. "Oh, it's just work. You know how these corporate parties are. A lot of stress, a lot of important business." "I imagine so. Are you going alone?" For a brief moment, Clay hesitated. Jade could see the internal conflict reflected in his eyes. Part of him wanted to tell the truth, to get rid of the lie. But another part still didn't have the courage. "Yes, it's alone. You know you don't like those things." "True," Jade agreed, taking a sip of wine. "But sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't force myself to participate more in your professional life. After all, we're a team, aren't we?" The irony in her voice went completely unnoticed by Clay, who was too busy answering a message from Layla under the table. Later that night, after Clay fell asleep, Jade locked herself in her office to do the final checks of her plan. She had created a detailed timeline of how everything would happen at the party. 7:30 p.m. Clay and Layla's arrival at the event. Ordupam, Jade's arrival as Jade Montenegro. 8:15 p.m. First strategic contact with Ricardo Mendoza. 8:30 p.m. Gradual approach to the business circles where Clay would be. 900 p.m. The moment of revelation. Every minute was planned with military precision. Jade knew exactly where Clay would be at every moment, who he would talk to, and what deals he would try to close. After all, she had organized his agenda for years. Jade's phone vibrated. It was a message from Carmen. "Honey, I got more information. Layla is telling all her friends that she's going to debut as Clay's official girlfriend at the party. She even posted a picture on Instagram stories trying on dresses with the caption, 'Special night coming.'" Jade sighed. Layla's naivety was almost touching. The young woman truly believed that Clay would leave Jade for her without consequences, that she could simply assume the position of wife without facing any resistance. She was about to discover that she had completely underestimated the woman she was trying to replace. The next morning, Jade woke up with a sense of absolute calm. It was as if all the anxiety, all the pain, and all the uncertainty of the past few days had crystallized into a cold, calculated determination. She prepared Clay's breakfast for the last time as a deceived wife. Starting tomorrow, everything would be different. When he came down, he found her more radiant than ever. "Good morning, love," she said, serving him coffee exactly as he liked it. "Good morning. You look very beautiful today." "Thank you. By the way, tomorrow night I'm going out with Carmen. Dinner and a movie. You don't mind, do you?" "Of course not. Have fun." Clay could barely hide his relief. If Jade was busy with her friend, he wouldn't need to invent any more excuses for coming home late after the party with Layla. After he left, Jade allowed herself a smile of satisfaction. Tomorrow night, Clay would discover that he had completely underestimated the woman he married. And Layla would learn that some positions in life are not won with just youth and naivety. The revenge was in its final 24 hours of preparation, and it would be devastatingly perfect. Like this video if you're on Jade's side. The Showdown. The event hall at the Savoy Hotel had never hosted an event as important as the annual British Importers Association party. The main hall was decorated with exotic flowers, Czech crystal chandeliers, and a panoramic view of the city that took your breath away. The most influential guests in the British business sector circulated between glasses of French champagne and canapés prepared by the hotel's executive chef. At exactly 7:30 p.m., Clay arrived at the event with Layla on his arm. She was stunning in a light pink dress that enhanced her youth, her blonde hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Clay, impeccable in his black tuxedo, smiled with the confidence of a man who could finally publicly display his conquest. "Are you nervous, my love?" he whispered in Layla's ear as they handed their invitations at the reception. "A little," she admitted, squeezing his arm. "But I'm happy. I can finally be by your side as your true woman." Clay smiled and delicately kissed her hand. "Today is our first official day as a couple, the first of many." They were received with enthusiasm by the other business people. Clay introduced Layla as his new business partner and strategic consultant, titles that made the young woman smile with pride. She didn't notice the curious and slightly malicious glances from some of the wives present, experienced women who immediately recognized the dynamic of the situation. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, Jade was making the final touches to her preparation. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror of her closet and barely recognized the woman staring back. The Paloma Herrera emerald green dress had transformed her into a modern goddess, elegant, powerful, and absolutely stunning. Her hair was pulled back into a sophisticated low bun, with a few strategically loose strands framing her face. The makeup was impeccable, her eyes highlighted with a perfect winged eyeliner, her lips in a nude tone that emphasized the natural beauty of her mouth. Her jewelry was discreet, but extremely expensive. Diamond earrings that had been a gift from Clay on their 3rd wedding anniversary, and a pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. "Perfect," she murmured to herself, adjusting the dress one last time. "It's time to show them who I really am." At 7:45 p.m., Jade got into the back of the Mercedes-Benz that Helen had rented for the occasion. The driver, discreetly instructed on the importance of punctuality, navigated the London streets with the precision of a professional pilot. During the ride, Jade mentally reviewed every detail of her plan. She knew exactly where Clay would be at 8:15 p.m. At the main bar, talking with representatives from the Japanese company Tanaka Industries, a deal he had been trying to close for months. She also knew that Layla would probably be by his side, smiling and nodding occasionally, clearly out of her element in the technical discussions about international logistics and customs regulations. At 8:10 p.m., the Mercedes stopped in front of the Savoy. Jade took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and got out of the car with the grace of a queen. The doorman, impressed with her elegance, practically stumbled as he opened the door for her. "Good evening, madam," he stammered. "Welcome to the Savoy." "Thank you," Jade replied with a smile that was both gentle and powerful. She entered the hotel and headed to the elevator that would take her to the party hall. In the elevator mirror, she made one last adjustment to her lipstick and allowed herself a smile of anticipation. In a few minutes, the most important show of her life would begin. The elevator doors opened on the party floor, and Jade made her entrance. The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. People whispered, questioning who the stunning woman who had just arrived was. Helen, strategically positioned near the entrance, approached immediately. "Jade Montenegro," she said, loud enough for nearby people to hear. "What a pleasure to see you. How is the flight from Barcelona?" "Excellent, thank you," Jade replied in perfect English, but with a slight accent that Helen had suggested to make the identity more convincing. "I'm very excited to meet the British businessmen. I've heard wonderful things about the local market." Meanwhile, on the other side of the hall, Clay was exactly where Jade had predicted, chatting animatedly with the Tanaka Industries executives. Layla was by his side, smiling and nodding occasionally, clearly out of her element in the technical discussions about international logistics and customs regulations. "Mr. Martin," Hiroshi Tanaka, the regional director, was saying, "we are impressed with your proposal, but we need guarantees about your company's ability to handle larger volumes." "Absolutely, Mr. Tanaka," Clay replied with confidence. "Our infrastructure has recently been expanded, and we have strategic partnerships that allow us to—" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes had caught a movement from the other side of the hall, a woman in a green dress who was drawing the attention of everyone around her. There was something familiar about her, something that made his heart beat faster in a way he couldn't explain. "Excuse me for a moment," he murmured, handing his card to Tanaka. "Layla, continue the conversation. I'll be right back." Layla, confused but obedient, tried to maintain a smile as Clay walked away, clearly distracted by something or someone. On the other side of the hall, Jade had been introduced to Ricardo Mendoza, exactly as planned. The businessman, elegant in his impeccable tuxedo, couldn't hide his admiration for the mysterious European investor. "Miss Montenegro," Ricardo said, delicately kissing her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Helen told me you represent a consortium interested in expanding into Latin America." "That's right, Mr. Mendoza. We are always looking for partnerships with visionary entrepreneurs," Jade replied, her eyes sparkling with an intelligence that fascinated Ricardo. "I've heard great things about your company. Perhaps we can talk about collaboration opportunities." "That would be an honor. Allow me to introduce you to some colleagues in the sector." As Ricardo guided her through the hall, Jade kept a part of her attention focused on Clay. She could see him approaching slowly, clearly intrigued by her presence. The plan was working perfectly. "Ricardo," she said softly, "isn't that Clay Martin from Clay Imports over there? I've heard a lot about his company." "Ah, yes. Clay is a competitor," Ricardo replied with a slightly ironic smile. "A competent businessman, I must admit, although his methods are sometimes questionable." "How so?" "Well, we recently discovered that he has been using privileged information obtained through, let's say, unconventional sources. Nothing illegal, mind you, but ethically dubious." Jade feigned surprise, although she knew exactly what Ricardo was referring to. It was one of the strategies she herself had developed for Clay years ago, using personal contacts to get information about bids before they went public. At the time, it seemed smart. Now, it would be another weapon in her arsenal. At that moment, Clay finally got close enough to see the mysterious woman's face clearly. When his eyes met hers, his world stopped. It was Jade, his wife. But it wasn't the Jade he knew. This woman radiated power, confidence, a sophisticated sensuality he had never seen in her. For a moment, he was paralyzed, unable to process how his submissive and home-loving wife had transformed into this goddess who commanded the attention of the entire hall. "Jade," he whispered in disbelief, taking a step forward. "Excuse me," she replied, feigning confusion with an Oscar-worthy performance. "I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm Jade Montenegro, a representative of the Barcelona Investment Consortium." Ricardo watched the interaction with growing interest. "You know each other?" She, Clay stammered, completely baffled. "Sorry, she looks a lot like someone I know." Jade smiled with a calculated coolness. "Oh, how interesting. You must be Clay Martin, from Clay Imports. I've heard a lot about your company. Ricardo here was telling me about the innovative methods you use." The word innovative carried a tone that made Clay shiver. There was something in those eyes, his wife's eyes, that warned him something was terribly wrong. "Jade, what are you doing here?" he whispered, low enough for only her to hear. "I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, but you keep confusing me with someone. Perhaps we should focus on business. I heard you were trying to close a contract with Tanaka Industries." Clay's blood ran cold. How did she know about the deal with the Japanese? It was confidential information he had only shared with one person. His eyes went back to Layla, who was still on the other side of the hall, trying to keep a conversation going with the Japanese executives. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. Jade knew. Somehow, his wife had discovered everything. "Ricardo," Jade continued, her voice soft as silk but sharp as a blade. "You mentioned something about questionable methods. Could you elaborate? As an investor, I need to fully understand the ethical standards of the companies we consider doing business with." Ricardo, delighted with the opportunity to annoy his competitor in front of a potential investor, smiled. "Well, there are rumors that Clay Imports obtains information about bids through, shall we say, intimate relationships with employees of public companies." Jade feigned shock. "Intimate relationships? What kind of relationships?" "The kind that can compromise the impartiality of certain business decisions," Ricardo replied, looking directly at Clay. Clay was turning pale. He didn't know where Ricardo had gotten that information, but it was dangerously close to the truth, and, worse, he was being exposed in front of his own wife, who for some devilish reason was pretending to be a foreign investor. At that moment, Layla approached, clearly confused by Clay's long disappearance. "Babe, the Japanese are asking where you went. They want to finalize the contract details." The silence that followed was deafening. Layla had just called Clay Babe in front of Ricardo Mendoza and the mysterious investor. Worse, she hadn't realized that the investor was, in fact, her lover's wife. Ricardo raised an eyebrow, clearly understanding the situation. Jade maintained an expression of mild confusion, as if she didn't fully comprehend the personal dynamics she was witnessing. "Your secretary?" Jade asked Clay innocently. She... Clay was completely lost. How to explain Layla without exposing the affair? How to maintain the professional facade when his personal life was imploding in public? "Actually," Layla said, with a naive confidence that made Jade feel a mix of pity and irritation. "I'm Clay's business partner and also, well, we're a couple." Well, the words echoed through the group like a bomb. Ricardo couldn't hide a satisfied smile. He finally had concrete evidence that Clay was using personal relationships to advance his business. And Jade smiled. It wasn't a gentle or understanding smile. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. "How interesting," she said, her voice maintaining its soft tone, but carrying a coldness that made Clay shiver. "And his wife? Does she know about this partnership?" Comment your thoughts on the final outcome, the final triumph. The 5 seconds of silence that followed Jade's question seemed like an eternity. Clay was frozen, his hands trembling slightly as he processed the magnitude of what was happening. Layla, still unaware of the investor's true identity, smiled with the naivety of someone who believed she had finally won her place in the sun. His wife? Layla laughed, a crystalline sound that cut through the air like a funeral bell. Oh, Miss Montenegro, that's a complicated story. Clay is in the process of separating from his wife. She's a very simple woman. She doesn't understand anything about business, you know. She stays home, has no ambitions. She's not like us, modern and independent women. Every word of Layla's was like a stab to Clay's heart, who watched in horror as his mistress destroyed any chance of getting out of this situation with dignity. Ricardo watched everything with the interest of someone who was witnessing the collapse of his biggest competitor. And Jade maintained her icy smile, preparing for the final blow. What an interesting perspective, Jade said softly. And tell me, Miss... I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Layla Herrera, the young woman replied with pride. I graduated in business from the University of London and have been working as a strategic consultant for Clay Imports for a few months. Strategic consultant, Jade repeated, savoring each word. What impressive responsibilities for someone so young. Tell me, what kind of strategies have you developed for the company? Layla blushed, clearly unsure how to answer. Her role in the company was basically decorative. She organized Clay's schedule, answered phone calls, and occasionally typed up reports that other people prepared. Well, I help with the general organization of operations. General organization, Jade murmured, pretending to take mental notes. And the market analyses, the feasibility studies, the international contract negotiations? Layla's silence was more eloquent than any answer. Ricardo began to laugh discreetly, finally understanding that he was watching a slow-motion massacre. You know, Jade continued, her voice gaining a dangerous edge. It's interesting how family businesses work. Many times, the true strategist behind the success is someone who works behind the scenes, without public recognition. Clay closed his eyes, knowing exactly where she was going. For example, Jade continued, discreetly taking some documents from her handbag. I was reviewing some materials on Clay Imports before our possible partnership, and discovered something fascinating. Most of the company's expansion strategies, the most innovative market analyses, and even the most lucrative contracts, all seem to have been developed by someone with advanced legal training, someone with a specialization in international business law. Ricardo leaned forward, intrigued. Clay tried to interrupt, but Jade continued relentlessly. But here's the interesting part. Officially, Clay Imports has never employed a full-time corporate lawyer. So, who developed these brilliant strategies? She made a theatrical pause, allowing the question to hang in the air. Unless, she continued, a devilish smile playing on her lips. The true strategist was someone very close to Mr. Martin. Someone with intimate access to all the company's information. Someone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, without ever receiving public credit. At that moment, several people around them began to pay attention to the conversation. Jade's voice, though soft, carried an authority that naturally attracted listeners. Are you referring to someone specific? Ricardo asked, clearly fascinated. I am referring, Jade said, her voice now filled with a coldness that made Clay shiver, to Clay Martin's wife, Jade Adams, a woman with a law degree from the London School of Economics, with a specialization in corporate law from the University of Barcelona. A woman who abandoned a promising career to support her husband's dreams. A woman who spent 8 years developing every strategy, reviewing every contract, and analyzing every market opportunity that transformed Clay Imports from a small family business into an import empire. The silence around them was absolute. People had moved closer, drawn by the palpable tension of the situation. Clay was as pale as a ghost, finally understanding the magnitude of what his wife had discovered and prepared. But you know what's most interesting? Jade continued, now addressing Layla directly, who was beginning to look uncomfortable. "It's that this simple woman who doesn't understand business is, in fact, the real architect of the success you now claim as your own." Layla looked nervously at Clay, seeking support, but he was petrified. Finally, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in the young woman's mind. "Miss Montenegro," Clay finally managed to whisper, "can we talk in private?" "Sorry, Mr. Martin, but I don't believe we have anything to discuss in private. As a potential investor, all my questions must be asked transparently." At that moment, Helen approached the group, followed by two elegant men that Jade recognized from her preparations. Journalists from The Economist, London's most important business publication. "Jade," Helen said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Thomas Restrepo and Mr. Carlos Vega from The Economist. They're doing a special report on international investors in the UK." The journalists greeted Jade respectfully, clearly impressed with her presence and articulation. "Miss Montenegro, it's a pleasure to meet you. Could we ask you some questions about your investment plans in the country?" "Of course," Jade replied gracefully. "But I was just discussing some ethical concerns about certain local companies with Mr. Mendoza." "Ethical concerns?" Thomas Restrepo asked, immediately interested. As an investigative journalist, he had a sharp nose for scandals. Ricardo, relishing the opportunity to expose his competitor, wasted no time. "We were discussing questionable practices of some companies in the sector, the use of privileged information, inappropriate personal relationships to gain competitive advantages, and," Jade added her voice, cutting through the air like a sword, "the misappropriation of intellectual property." The words dropped like a bomb. Clay finally understood there was no escape. His wife hadn't just discovered the affair. She had prepared his complete and public destruction. "Intellectual property?" Carlos Vega asked, his journalistic antennae fully active. "Yes," Jade replied, taking more documents from her bag. "I have evidence here that certain companies have systematically appropriated the intellectual work of unrecognized collaborators, specifically spouses, who contributed significantly to the development of business strategies without receiving proper credit or compensation." She handed the documents to the journalists. "These are contracts, market analyses, and expansion strategies, all developed by an uncredited source, but which were publicly presented as original work by the company's management." Clay tried to intervene. "Those documents are private. You can't—" "Actually," Jade interrupted him, her Jade Montenegro mask finally falling. "I can, because all these documents were developed by me, Jade Adams, your wife, the woman you just allowed your mistress to call simple and unambitious." The impact of the revelation was seismic. Layla turned as white as paper, finally understanding that she had spent the last few minutes insulting the wife of the man she loved, a wife who now revealed herself to be much more formidable than she ever imagined. The journalists began taking photos and notes frantically. Ricardo laughed openly, delighted with the spectacle. "And Clay?" Clay collapsed into a nearby chair, finally understanding that he had lost everything. "Gentlemen of the press," Jade continued, now speaking with the authority of an experienced executive, "I have a proposal. How about an exclusive interview about female intellectual property in the business world? I have a fascinating story about how talented women are systematically erased from the successes they help build." "That would be fantastic," Thomas Restrepo responded immediately. "Can we schedule it for tomorrow?" "Perfect. And I assume you would also like to investigate the ethical practices of Clay Imports? I have extensive documentation on questionable methods of obtaining contracts." While the journalists made appointments, and Ricardo offered additional information about his competitor's dubious practices, Layla finally found the courage to speak. You're really his wife?" Jade turned to her with a look that mixed pity and contempt. "I am. Or rather, I was. Because after tonight, I believe our marriage has definitely come to an end. I didn't know you were smart, capable, powerful. No, darling. You believed the version Clay presented of me, the simple wife who stays home doing nothing. Did you ever wonder how a mediocre man like Clay managed to build a business empire all by himself? Layla couldn't respond. Tears began to stream down her face as the magnitude of her naivety became clear. Jade turned to Clay, who remained silent, destroyed. As for you, my dear ex-husband, I hope you enjoyed your last party as the owner of Clay Imports. Because starting tomorrow, when my lawyers file for divorce, you will find out exactly what percentage of the company legally belongs to me. She paused, allowing the words to sink in. You see, for 8 years, I meticulously documented every contribution I made to the company, every strategy, every analysis, every contract. And according to the law, spouses are entitled to compensation for intellectual contributions to family businesses. Clay's face lost all remaining color. By the way, Jade continued with a smile that was pure venom, Ricardo, I believe we discussed a possible partnership between your company and my future independent venture. That would be an honor, Jade, Ricardo replied, kissing her hand with genuine admiration. A woman with your intelligence and experience would be a valuable partner. Jade turned one last time to Clay and Layla. Revenge, she said softly, is truly a dish best served cold, and you two have just been served. With that, she took Ricardo's arm and walked away, leaving behind the wreckage of the life she had built with Clay and Layla's naive dreams. Behind her, she could hear the sound of cameras photographing the destroyed couple and the voices of journalists asking increasingly aggressive questions. Jade Adams had died that night. In her place, a stronger, smarter, and definitely more dangerous woman was born. And her empire was just beginning. The party continued around them, but for Clay and Layla, the music had stopped forever. 6 months later, the morning sun bathed the executive office on the top floor of the Shard, one of London's most prestigious buildings. Jade Montenegro, the name Jade had adopted professionally after the divorce, delicately adjusted her porcelain cup as she reviewed the financial reports of her new company. Montenegro, Strategic Consulting. 6 months. Only 6 months had passed since that transformative night at the Savoy, and Jade had built an empire that rivaled anything Clay had ever dreamed of achieving. The secretary's phone rang in the office next door. Ms. Montenegro, Mr. Ricardo Mendoza is here for the 10 o'clock meeting, announced Sophia, her executive assistant, an experienced and efficient 40-year-old woman, very different from the decorative secretaries other executives preferred. You can send him in, Sophia. And please, ask her to cancel my schedule after lunch. Ricardo has an interview for CNN International at 2 in the afternoon. Jade smiled as she remembered how she got here. The public humiliation of Clay that night had been just the first move of a much more complex and satisfying chess game. Ricardo entered the office, elegant as always, but now there was something in his eyes that Jade recognized perfectly. Genuine admiration and a touch of reverence. He was no longer the powerful businessman courting a potential investor. He was an equal partner recognizing an equal. Good morning, Jade, he said, delicately kissing her hand. The third quarter numbers are impressive. Our joint venture has exceeded all projections. Good morning, Ricardo. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss about the expansion into Colombia. As he settled into the Italian leather armchair, a piece of furniture she had chosen herself to match the minimalist and powerful decor of her office, Jade allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The joint venture between Montenegro Strategic and Ricardo's companies had become one of the most profitable partnerships in the British international trade sector. But the real pleasure didn't just come from the financial success. It came from the poetic justice of her rise being built on the rubble of Clay's arrogance. "Before we begin," Ricardo said, taking a magazine from his executive briefcase, "did you see the cover of The Economist this week?" Jade smiled. "How could I not have seen it?" Her photo occupied the entire cover of London's most important business magazine, accompanied by the headline, "Jade Montenegro, the strategic mind that revolutionized UK international trade." The 8-page story told the official tale of her career. A brilliant lawyer specializing in international business law who had decided to start her own company after years of working discreetly as a consultant. The article highlighted her impeccable education, her innovative strategic vision, and her almost supernatural ability to identify market opportunities before competitors. Of course, the article didn't mention Clay directly. It didn't need to. Anyone in the British business sector knew exactly where the experience and knowledge that now made Jade Montenegro one of the most sought-after consultants in the country came from. "It's an excellent article," Jade commented modestly, "although I think it exaggerated a little in some aspects." "Exaggerated?" Ricardo laughed. "Jade, in 6 months you have built a company that already bills more per quarter than some traditional companies bill per year, transformed 3 family companies into market leaders, and developed international expansion strategies that are being studied at universities. If there is exaggeration, it's out of modesty." It was true. After that fateful night, Jade had channeled all her suppressed energy and intelligence into building something genuinely her own. Every client she won, every successful strategy she implemented, and every £1,000,000 contract she closed was a silent declaration of her true worth. And the clients came in droves. Businessmen who had known her work behind the scenes at Clay Imports could finally hire the mind behind the strategies they so admired directly. International executives who had been impressed by market analyses developed by Clay's team discovered that they could work directly with the true author. Jade's phone vibrated discreetly. A message from Carmen, her best friend, and now the director of communications for her company. "Honey, you need to see this. I just got a call from Forbes UK. They want to include you on the list of the 30 most influential businesswomen in the country. And there's more. CNN UK wants to do a documentary about women who have turned personal failures into spectacular business successes." Jade typed quickly. "Schedule the interviews. And Carmen, thank you for always being by my side." "Is it good news?" Ricardo asked, noticing her smile. "There's always good news when you control your own narrative," Jade replied philosophically. "But let's talk business. How are the negotiations with the Colombian group?" While they discussed expansion details and market strategies, Jade couldn't help but have a flashback to those dark days 6 months ago when she discovered the betrayal and felt as if her world had collapsed. What a naive woman she had been, thinking that her life depended on Clay. What a terrible mistake she had made by diminishing her own dreams to support his. What precious time she had lost, being the perfect wife for a man who didn't even value her enough to introduce her publicly. But maybe all of that had been necessary. Maybe she needed to go through that humiliation to rediscover her own strength. Maybe she needed to be underestimated, to learn to never underestimate herself again. The intercom interrupted her thoughts. "Ms. Montenegro, Miss Helen Vasquez is online too. She says it's about the launch event for your foundation." "Thanks, Sophia. Tell her I'll call her back in an hour." Ah, the foundation. That had been another project born from that traumatic night. The Jade Montenegro Foundation for Female Entrepreneurship had already helped more than 200 women launch their own businesses. The focus was specific: women who had sacrificed their careers for marriages or relationships and now wanted to rebuild their professional lives. Every story that reached the foundation echoed her own experience. Lawyers who became housewives, engineers who abandoned projects to support husbands, and doctors who paused specialties to raise children, and then discovered that their husbands had moved on to younger companions. Jade had turned her pain into purpose, her humiliation into strength for other women, and nothing satisfied her more than receiving calls from businesswomen who had rebuilt their lives with the help of the foundation. "Jade," Ricardo said, interrupting her thoughts. "Can I ask a personal question?" "Of course. Do you have any news of him? Your ex-husband?" Jade paused, considering the question. Yes, she had news. How could she not? In the business city of London, circles were small and gossip traveled quickly. Clay had tried to save his company after the scandal, but the combination of media exposure, the loss of important contracts, and the divorce lawsuit, where Jade had legally proven her intellectual contribution to the business, had been devastating. Clay Imports was forced to declare bankruptcy 3 months after that fateful night. He now worked as a sales manager at a mid-sized company, a position that represented a dramatic fall from his former status as a successful businessman. People in the sector knew his story. They knew that the empire he had built had actually been built by his ex-wife. They knew he had traded a brilliant partner for a youthful fling, and Layla. Poor Layla had learned in the cruelest way possible that being the other woman rarely ends well. Clay, desperate and humiliated, had taken out his frustrations on the young woman he considered responsible for his downfall. The relationship ended in just 6 weeks, leaving Layla unemployed, disgraced, and with a ruined professional reputation. She currently worked at a small accounting firm in the city's suburbs, far from the glamorous world she thought she had conquered. "I have some information," Jade replied carefully, "but I prefer to focus on the present and the future. The past has already served its purpose." Ricardo nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in her words. "You are an extraordinary woman, Jade. To turn betrayal into triumph and humiliation into an empire is not something everyone can do. Any woman has that strength within her, Ricardo. Sometimes we just need an extreme situation to discover it." The phone rang again. It was Sophia, informing her that the executives of the German company Hoffman Industries had arrived for the meeting about European expansion. Jade stood up, adjusting the blazer of a tailored suit that cost more than the monthly salary Clay now earned. Her Louboutin heels Chitrios echoed on the marble as she headed to the door. "Ricardo, let's welcome our German guests. I have a proposal that will revolutionize our presence in the European market." As they walked down the corridor toward the main meeting room, Jade passed in front of the full-length mirror that decorated the wall. The woman who stared back at her was unrecognizable from the submissive and naive wife of 6 months ago. This Jade radiated confidence, power, and success. Her eyes shone with the sharp intelligence of someone who had learned to never underestimate her own worth again. Her smile carried the serenity of someone who had turned her greatest defeat into her greatest victory. She was no longer the wife Clay was ashamed to present. She was the woman he could never win back. And contrary to what many people expected, Jade felt no bitterness or desire for additional revenge. That night at the Savoy had been enough. Clay and Layla had received exactly the consequences that their choices deserved. Now, Jade was too busy building her own legacy to waste time looking back. As she entered the meeting room, where German businessmen rose respectfully to greet her, Jade Montenegro smiled. Not a smile of revenge or superiority, but a smile of genuine satisfaction. She had proved something much more important than her ability to take revenge. She had proved her capacity for rebirth, and that, after all, was the sweetest triumph of all. The meeting began, and Jade Montenegro, formerly Jade Adams, the hidden ex-wife, took her place at the head of the table as the CEO of one of the most respected consulting firms in London. The future had never looked so bright.